Hello, everyone. Literati people. Happy New Year 2022. I don't know how I'm feeling about it so far. But I am excited to be joined by the great Ann Leary. She is the author of my December Literati book pick, The Good House, one of my favorite books of all time. You guys seemed to really love it. And I'm so happy it came out. And it came out like 10 years ago.
It did. I know it's been a while, but thank you so much for choosing it for your book club.
Oh my God.
Really nice.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. So we only have 30 minutes. They're like really weirdly strict. They like will cut us off after 30 minutes. So we have a lot of ground to cover. So I want to start by asking, because I don't know the answer to this, because you and I have met, but we have never really had like a long conversation about our writing. How did you get into writing novels?
Well, I, majored in writing and literature in college. And so I had written short stories and other things for, since I was, in college. But my first book actually wasn't a novel. It was a memoir. And then it was called An Innocent Abroad, but it was an innocent, a broad, like a woman.
Gotcha.
And then my first novel was Outtakes from the Marriage. So The Good House was my third novel, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
Third book. Well,
no,
third book, right?
Third book, second yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And,
yes, and okay, I think it was 2013, so it's almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was published. But it was my first New York Times bestseller.
Yeah. It's so masterful. So that's why I was wondering, like, I can remember reading it in 2012. Like, this book is so perfect. Like, it has all of the elements. So just for those of you, everyone's read it who's watching this, but, tells the story of our main lovable character, Hildy Good, who lives in a small town on the North Shore. She's a realtor. She's also an alcoholic. She has two daughters who are a little judgy. She has an ex-husband who has turned out to be gay. He's an antiques dealer. She has sort of like that on again, off again relationship with Frank Getchell, who's sort of the old salt around town. And then a new woman purchases a house from Hildy. It's Rebecca McAllister. She's involved. She's sort of a mystery. And so tell me, like, where the idea for this plot came from.
Well, the idea for the plot came from a real story I had read about a woman who had an affair with her psychiatrist. And I found out that's against the law. I didn't know that. And I hadn't really known there were any kind of, it was against the law for consenting adults to have, in our country, to have sexual relations with one another.
Right.
So I was exploring that story. And Hildy Good, who ended up being the main character. She was originally kind of a peripheral character. And it wasn't even told from her point of view. But I was really having trouble writing. It wasn't interesting. And the only time it came alive was when I was writing about Hildy, because I really understood Hildy really well. And eventually I kind of just wanted to write about her. And then I kind of felt like she wanted to tell the story herself, and I gave it over. It sounds really, I hate when authors do that and act like they're book, but it really did happen that she kind of took the helm. And then as soon as I started writing from Hildy's voice, which I really felt that I knew, I've known a lot of Hildy's, there's a little bit of Hildy in me. I'm from New England, as I know you live in New England. It's a very specific type that I quite love. And so as soon as I started writing from Hildy's point of view, the story kind of really started to work for me. The writing became easier.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, she's such a great character. And Rebecca is less, not that she's less vivid, but she's certainly less interesting. So what you're telling me is that when you started writing this novel, you were writing it from Rebecca's point of view,
not from her point of view. It was more from a third person point of view. But I was really exploring, I'm really interested in people who become obsessed with other people, certain types of personality disorders that some people have that make them a little bit interesting to me, but maybe not the most functioning with, the highly functioning in society or in relationships. I was really interested in exploring that relationship between her and the psychiatrist. And then that became kind of the B plot. Really what the story became was Hildy's, it was still a story about a relationship, but it was really like Hildy's relationship with herself, with alcohol, with herself. And that was through coming to terms with whether or not she is an alcoholic, which, she certainly knows she's not. There's nothing wrong with her if going around the world, but others
Right.
think she might have a problem. So I just, I also, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I kind of came out about that when the book came out. And I don't think anyone's ever really explored what denial really is. And I thought it'd be interesting to write about it from the point of view of a person in denial. When you're in a state of denial, you're not really lying. You actually believe you're in a reality that that you need to be in to keep your, to be in your world, which is, kind of, I'm not really, I used to have the perfect book talk for this, but it's been a while, but
Right.
but
It's been
but
a
I still
while.
know what it
Yeah.
is. It's just denial. I wanted the reader to be in denial with Hildy for as long as possible. And that was really a fun exercise as a writer, was to
Right.
have, I love an unreliable narrator, and I wanted the reader to be on Hildy's side and to believe with Hildy, like, come on, these daughters are a pain in the ass. They aren't, why can't you just enjoy a drink? Why are they so judgy? And then like,
Right.
and then for the reader to have some surprises that Hildy had, that came with her drinking.
Right. Which is like, oh, at the end, Frank is like, and she's like, what? But yeah,
Yeah.
I really think it works because I mean, I remember so the second time I read it, obviously, which was recently, I already knew what was going to happen. It was 10 years, so I didn't exactly remember, but I knew that something was coming at the end. But it's very, very interesting. I feel like women in sobriety right now is like a very hot topic. So I feel like a lot of this was super relevant. A lot of The Good House by Ann Leary really does examine like a woman's struggle, even just to acknowledge that she has a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, because she's functioning. She's really a very successful business person. And this is what she uses, to make herself, and tries to make other people understand there's nothing really wrong with her. It's, if people have issues, it's their problem. But she's very successful. She never drinks in the day. She never drinks, alone. She, except every now and then, all these things that a person might tell themselves. And she is successful. A lot of people really do believe, especially people of a certain generation, if an alcoholic is a person who can't function in a job and who does drink all day, and the kids come home and they're passed out on the floor all the time. That's what a lot of people do think of, and they don't. Hildy certainly was of that generation that, that's not her. What's the problem? She likes to have her wine
Right, exactly. Which she
all night long by herself.
hides in the basement. Okay, so the other thing that, of course, I love about this novel, because I live on Nantucket, is the idea of like small town gossip.
Right.
So it's so great in this book, like, and I so relate with it, small town gossip. And then this morning when I was thinking about this talk, I thought, what is like the best piece of small town gossip that I've heard in the last 30 years of living here that I could like share? So, I mean, there's so many things, but they're so particular that I'm afraid to say them.
Right. Well, it's very small town year round in Nantucket. So
I know it's a very small town, but I mean, like every year you hear about, obviously the affairs that were conducted over the winter. I mean, that's crazy, but also like and I've used this in a novel, like there was a rumor that a real estate agent had these Russian prostitutes living out in this rental house, and that, he would send them to his high-end rentals.
Was it true?
I mean, I never figured out that was the rumor, and I put it in I used it in my novel. I didn't actually know for sure. I mean, a lot of times I'm just thinking that is absolutely not true, but maybe it is.
Wait, which novel was that? Tell me.
It was called The Rumor.
The Rumor. Okay.
And actually the rumor in The Rumor wasn't that was happening in the novel The Rumor, but The Rumor was something else. But I mean, I love like small town gossip and people talking, and what I call on Nantucket is the cobblestone telegraph. So I happen to think or believe that you live out in like Litchfield or somewhere in Connecticut.
I did when I was writing this, but I actually lived in Marblehead, Massachusetts, which is, an old historic seacoast town. It's parts of it look like Nantucket, I think.
Yep.
I moved there when I was 14 from Racine, Wisconsin, which is Kenosha is, like part of Racine. It's like right next door. So we moved a lot as a kid, and I only came to New England in middle school. So I was very, very aware of this specific character personality that was unique to a lot of people in New England. And I was I'm still fascinated by it because I, again, had moved a lot, mostly in the Midwest, but other parts of the East. And just when I moved to this particular, part of New England, I was suddenly living, going to school with kids who's hadn't only lived their whole lives, but their parents, their grandparents. There was the Cove was named after their ancestor. It was just like people, had lived there forever, and and then I did live in a small town for 20 years in upper Northwest Connecticut, and it was very much a place where everyone knew I was volunteer EMT, so I did get to know a lot of people. And I feel that, there's this thing I really admire about, there's things that are difficult about certain New Englanders, and there's something that I love about them. But one thing is that some might not seem friendly, especially in Massachusetts. I find people sometimes might seem a little standoffish and, not friendly, but that same person will put their neighbor for, they'll do anything for you. If they will always, there's this kind of quiet nobility, and it was that kind of character that I wanted to kind of reveal in Frank Getchell.
Mhm.
I knew Frank Getchell's in Marblehead. I knew people in Connecticut, but he's not based on a specific person. But
Right.
everywhere I went on this book tour, people
Right.
raised their hand and said, I know who Frank Getchell is based on. And, it was some guy they knew in New Hampshire. And it really made me feel good, because I felt like if you're, the character rang true to people, and any self-respecting New England town should have a Frank Getchell, or at least did, 10 years ago, that kind of an old guy. He collects garbage. He's a handyman, and he's actually really well-to-do, but doesn't spend his money because he's a Yankee. He doesn't like to, he just doesn't need anything.
Right.
He
Numerous,
really doesn't like to spend money.
numerous Frank Getchels on Nantucket, needless to say, like the old
Of
salt. Like
course.
I have a friend, I won't say his name, although there is no chance he would ever see this, but he works at the water, he works at the water company, and he can absolutely fix anything, will show up for you in a pinch, but has worked for the water company since he got out of high school. And I believe him to be in his 60s. And I mean, he can fix anything, will show up in a pinch, knows everybody, has known everybody since before the before. You know what I mean? Third or fourth generation Nantucketer. And that's who I thought of when I read about Frank. Frank is a fantastic character.
Yeah. And Frank was actually, my sister, who still lived in Marblehead, called me after she read a draft, and she said, you have to change the Frank character. And she named this guy we went to high school with. And turns out I didn't even know, but he had all the jobs I described in the book. He's the town was like founded by his, like, in the 1600s by one of his ancestors. But I said, I didn't even know he did that. Now he's not based on him. I didn't even know that's what he was doing. So, and then everyone in the town I was living in definitely thought he was based on someone in that town. So anyway, he was just a
Yeah,
I just compiled
sure. Huge
characters into one.
compilation. I absolutely love it. I loved him. I want to talk a little bit about your writing process. So, I mean, I read The Children. I haven't read your first two books, which is now I'm thinking I'm going to go back and read them. I read The Children, and then you have a new book out, which we'll talk about in depth in a minute. But what is your writing process like when you were writing The Good House, when you're writing The Children, when you're writing your other books? Like, you're not on a book a year schedule, for which I'm extremely envious.
No.
You sort of take your time. And then I also want to talk about how you got your publisher, etc.
Okay, so I'm definitely not on a book a year schedule, but I do write every day, which shows I'm not a fast writer.
Right.
I actually really love to write. I write in the morning. I'm definitely a morning person. I like to get up really early and write, and I'm probably at my best, between 6 and 9, and then I write till about 1 or 2, and then I can't write anymore, and I can't even really look at what I've written because I have this weird cycle where, like, my confidence kind of wanes, and by the time, if I were to look at something I wrote at 9 in the morning that made me feel like, wow, this is really good. If I look at it at 3, I'm actually like blushing and I'm dying of shame because
Okay.
so I try to just write in the mornings. I do try to write every day. My new book, The Foundling.
Let's see it.
Yeah. Is I've been working on since I finished The Children, really, and that was, it's been about 5 years. But I wrote it, I rewrote it. Again, it's another book I wrote. I wrote a whole draft in the third person, and then I changed the whole thing to the first person. And I like to write. I really, really like to rewrite. I like to edit, and I kind of do every day. So my process is, I actually will, when I sit down in the morning, I don't start from where I left off. I go back, I fine tune. I'd really love to finesse, and then I go, okay, that's what's going to happen today in this book. And I also learned during, maybe my second or probably my second or third book, to leave a scene when it's working. Like if you leave when you're like, this scene, I can't, then you come back to it and you got nothing. But if the scene's really working, you want to stay on. Then I do want to keep writing for the rest of the day. I'll stop, because it's a great way to come back in the morning and come to a scene that's already alive for me. And so I think that's something I try to do. I can't always do it because the book isn't always working, but
I do that as well. So it's so funny. Yeah. So many things that you just said resonate with me. I do that as well. So I also I can't always do it because, I'm writing longer books, but will almost always go back. So when I sit down to write for the day, I will almost always go back 10 pages to the beginning of the section, whatever.
Yeah.
And I describe it like a wave. So like rather than just like going to where you stopped and picking up, you're like sort of riding the wave and you go. And I agree. If a scene is working, I will always cut out before it's finished.
Yeah.
Because you sort of know how it's going to end, and you already have the rhythm, and then you hop in, and then you can just finish. That is also what I do. I don't think I've ever articulated that, but that is in fact exactly what I do. I'm curious, what prompted you to rewrite? And maybe we should stop and sort of go back, and why don't you tell us about the Foundling, the premise, etc., and then please tell me why you decided to change the point of view, because point of view is something that I'm absolutely obsessed with.
Right. Okay. So the Foundling was actually based on something I found out about my grandmother, who I didn't know very well, although she lived until I was in my 30s. I wanted to know why she was an orphan. I knew that, but I didn't know much about her, and I'd only met her a couple of times when I was little. But I started to, I joined Ancestry.com, and wanted to know what orphanage she grew up in. And I found out, I didn't find that out. I found out that in 1930, she worked at a place called the Laurelton State Village for feeble-minded women of childbearing age. And I thought it was it was like outdated terminology, and certainly, really horrible sounding now. But I thought it was a school for women with intellectual disabilities. And my grandmother worked as a stenographer. So I was like, oh, that's kind of, and she was 17 when she worked there. So I was like, oh, that's cool. She worked for a place that helped people. And then I delved a little deeper, and it turned out it was a eugenics asylum. I found out it was one of many in this country, something we didn't learn about in our history classes if we went to public school in America. But if you lived in the UK, you certainly did learn about it, because the United Kingdom and America were very much invested in of the eugenics movement that eventually, informed Hitler. But not Hitler, and none of that has to do with my book. This book is about based on a character that I had to use what I knew about my grandmother's life, and then what I knew about the asylum, and make a story. I knew a lot about the asylum, and I knew a lot about her boss, who was a fascinating woman, who was a female psychiatrist, and because of newspaper archives and because of books. And so I had, on the one hand, it was great writing historical fiction. It's set in the 1920s. And so I loved that, this is my first historical novel. I love the framework that it really helped with the plot of writing historical fiction and knowing a lot of information. But, I still have unanswered questions about my grandmother, but I think I figured out a lot about her while writing this. I'm still fascinated. There's not a day I don't look up something about that time and about these asylums. I can't stop thinking about it.
I mean, it's obviously just like, so, sort of shining a flashlight in a corner that maybe we wouldn't want to think about. The the title of the place alone, Anne.
Yeah. I mean, everything about it in those days, there were moron, imbecile, and idiot were clinical terms. So, and they were, that's how they graded a person who had an intellectual deficit. Morons were the highest functioning, and then the imbecile was medium, and then an idiot was, profoundly disabled.
Okay.
But this was a school for bad girls. These were girls who mostly, it was prohibition. They'd been caught drinking in a speakeasy. They were prostitutes. People were poor. It was central Pennsylvania. It was coal mining country. So a lot of the women in those days, they had confused sociologists, with the Jukes and the Kallikaks. They had confused the heredity of. They believed criminality was hereditary, and they believed you could, stop poverty and crime by stopping paupers and criminals from being born. So the idea of these places were lock these women up, and you could be put there at age 16 after you were caught, doing whatever, being molested by your uncle, or he wanted you sent away, whatever. You had to stay till menopause, and no judge was needed to send you there. Your husband could send you. Yeah. So I originally was writing it in the third person, and once again, I just felt I wanted Mary to tell the story herself, the main character, who was, again, based on my grandmother. And that's when the book, again, it just took on this voice that's very different than the voice of any other novel I wrote. I read a lot of novels set at that time. I wanted her to use language that people used. I only read the novels that were written at that time, not current novels set. And I wanted to get lingo and jargon right. So,
Right. That's so fascinating. I don't use first person. So I never use it. I find it so impossible to write as somebody else. So I always write close third because it's me doing it. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Me. But I find first person, but you really preferred it in this case.
Yes, because I was writing in a close third. So it was like, the advantage of writing in the third is you have access. The narrator can tell the reader more than but I was already, only kind of telling it from her perspective. But when I use her voice, my mother hasn't, my grandmother ended up being, very, having a lot of issues and had a terrible life and was kind of disturbed. And so I didn't know a lot about it. Once I asked my mother, because my mother's very funny, and I said, "Did your mom have a sense of humor?" And she said, "Oh yeah, she was very funny."
Okay.
I never even thought that, because I knew she was also could be quite horrible. So I really thought, oh, that helps. And so I did make, and I felt like this is certainly not a grim story. My grandmother met her husband, who was my grandfather, while she was working there. He went to Bucknell, which was the next town over. It's a romantic, there's a love story. It's told from a woman who has a sense of humor, who likes to have fun. There's flappers. I mean, it's the Roaring 20s. It's set in 1927. So yeah, I think it just helped having a person tell it who people could relate to. And it just worked for this book in the end better than what I had tried prior.
And what day does it come out, Anne?
It comes out May 31st of 22. So it's a while, but you can pre-order. But I will be, you have to, as you know, you have to literally throw yourself on social media and make everyone crazy with your self-promotion. So
yes,
sorry, everybody, you'll be hearing me. It's awful because it's not my favorite. My favorite thing to do is write and to rewrite. I don't love to brag about my books or talk about them as much as other people do. I guess, I don't know. Maybe no one does, but
no one likes it. I absolutely
thank you.
I'm sort of like, okay. I mean, because people get excited. So that's nice. So then people get excited, and then you want to give them something. And so you're giving them this on May 31st, 2022, which is this May.
Right.
Right after Memorial Day weekend. Sorry. They can get right at the start of summer.
Right.
They can get the Foundling.
Right. And hopefully you'll have me come back on your book club, and hope to come to Nantucket.
Yes, well, if you come to Nantucket, I mean, really what we should do, Anne, is just do an event. Are they sending you on tour? I'm so curious.
Oh, I think so. I think they are.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Oh, actually, I forgot about COVID. I don't know. Who knows? Our tours exist, but virtual tours for sure. I will come to Nantucket virtually. However, I'd prefer.
I know. I did. I went out on the road this past summer and had zero problems. But I mean, this was the summer was a weird sweet spot in the pandemic, right? At the beginning, because Nantucket anyway lifted all the rules on May 29th, and my book came out on June 1st. So I went all over the country and had no Now things have like sort of gotten worse.
Yeah.
Hopefully by the time you're ready to go out, anyway, if you come to Nantucket, we're getting together.
I would love that.
We're gonna have coffee and I will do an event with you and it'll be so much fun.
That'll be so much fun.
Before I wanna ask a couple more questions. I know that you have animals, and I feel like our viewers I want them to hear about your animals.
Well, I have one who
Hello,
I think,
animal.
I think she's still alive. She's very old. I have this little one, and I can trust that she needs to be with me all the time, but she won't bark because she can't hear anything. Like she's kind of like me. She's very old. And then we have 2 other dogs. I do have a dog on my Instagram all the time who's
All the time.
Yeah, he's very talented and does a lot of tricks.
Does a lot of
He's
tricks.
part cattle dog, so I found out he was a genius and started teaching him some funny tricks. And then I have a couple little ponies and a horse, but that's it.
Okay, because
I'd love to have more animals, but then I'd be a hoarder. So
no, I know. I just love watching your Instagram because I like watching, and your Facebook because I like watching you do tricks with the dog. That must be the cattle dog. And am I dreaming? Because it's also been a while. Does the children have animals in it?
You know, all my books have dogs, but they're never main characters. Yeah, there were 2 pet dogs, and then Hildy had 2 dogs, and I actually found out I named a dog in the Foundling the same name as one of the dogs in the Good House. I don't know. I just like I can't. It's hard enough to name real pets. It's hard.
Oh, please, I know.
But I don't. I'm actually. After this book, The Foundling, I also have a contract for an essay collection, which is half finished, and I write a lot about that. Will have a lot about my animals.
Okay, good.
A passion. And actually why I got into writing and reading in the first place was my love for animals. I got into, all the Jack London and John Steinbeck, The Red Pony, and like books about animals brought me to books in general. So
oh my goodness,
I love animals. So.
And that's a perfect segue because I was going to ask, like, what kinds of things are you reading? You said you've been reading in the period of the Foundling. So what?
Well, I was when I was writing it. Yeah, I was reading, of course.
Edith Wharton.
Well, Edith Wharton, yeah, I love Edith Wharton. One of my favorite books is an Edith Wharton book, but that's a little bit earlier. But yeah, Custom of the Country would be on my list of favorite books. But I was just this morning thinking about talking about books about New England, and I was thinking about this Edith Wharton book. Did you ever read Summertime by Edith Wharton? It's a little book, and it's okay. So it's like the winter version. It's the summer version of Ethan Frome, which when people think of Edith Wharton, they think of these like grand New York society, but this is a beautiful little book. And if anybody wants a good, there was a time when I used to read Ethan Frome every winter just to feel that it was a winter. And Summertime is really, 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 I was very emotional when I read it. It's very short, but it's the same kind of tone, right? Don't you think? So I recommend that.
It's a thin book, like Ethan Frome is also thin.
Yes, it's one of her little books. It's another New England book. But it's set in the northwest corner. No, actually, it's Lenox, Massachusetts. So it's the Berkshires.
Yep,
it's great. What was the question? What were we talking? Oh,
so what you were reading?
I've just started the new Antoine Wilson book, which I got an early copy of, Mouth to Mouth. It's amazing. I get some books early because of friends. So I read my friend Laura Zigman's new novel. I don't even know if it has a title yet, but it's amazing, and you'll be seeing it. I'm about next on my list. I really want to read this book. It's like The Good Mothers. The School for Good Mothers. I just read a great review, and I am reading that next. So I guess that's right now. That's what I'm reading. What about you? What are you reading?
I just started a book called Red Island House by Andrea Lee, which is set in Madagascar. And before that, I read a book. So the sort of polar opposite of that is I read Jane L. Rosen's new book, Shoe Story, which Shoe Story is set in Manhattan, and it's very like rom-com-ish. So good. It's coming out in July. And then I wanted something, a little pithier. So I picked up Red Island House, which is set in Madagascar. Oh my gosh. I mean, and I picked it up this morning before I picked up my phone.
You can't put it down.
That is my best endorsement I can give. Okay, we are going to get cut off in 45 seconds.
Okay.
So I want to end by saying, The Good House, Ann Leary, you're the best. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I was so happy to include it. And
thank you so much.
Ann has a new book out May 31st. Let's hold up the cover, Ann, so we can show everyone.
Foundling.
The Foundling. which is out May 31st. Pre-order it today, anywhere books are sold.
Yeah, and AnnLeary.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter.
Ann Leary, and follow her on Instagram, and come to Nantucket.
I will. I can't wait to see you when I come. All right.